Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, listener question edition, where there is a lesson in every story. Each week, the team at HR Stories podcast shares questions from our podcast audience and provides tangible, practical advice that everyone can use to get HR right. Our hosts today are management and HR consultants Chuck Simikian and John Tallheimer. What is on your mind today? HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. The Q&A version. Chuck is trying to make me laugh, and I think it's going to work. Welcome, everyone, to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. We're so glad you're here. My name is John Tallheimer, and I am here with my friend and business partner and co-author. Wow, we have a lot of relationships there, Chuck. Chuck Simikian. We call him HR
co-author, co-host, codependent, all those great things.
Oh my goodness. All right. So we're going to dive right into the questions, Chuck. We got some really interesting questions. Some of them came through our email, which is email@team@hrstories.com. So if you do have a question, feel free to reach out to us. We also got some from the Facebook group as well. So our first question is from Texas. Chrissy in Texas says this: several of my employees clock in early, get coffee, sit around talking prior to their scheduled shift. Are we required to pay them for that time?
Oh, bad. Shame.
Who are you shaming?
Oh, John. The poor employees are like, for a couple of shekels, they just want to have a little bit of me time, a little downtime, a little camaraderie time.
I'm paying them for that? Come on. Why should I pay them for that?
Okay. So, short answer. I mean, if you're going to push me into a corner, which I kind of am right now, I'm going to say, yes, you got to pay them. Cause they've clocked in and they're in. You would be hard pressed to change that. And they could make a claim that they were trying to talk about work and stuff. So yes, pay them. But John, this came up today. I was sharing a book. I had one of those contagion people that was kind of always down to, based on our latest story from this past week. And so I was sharing with them, there's a book called Love 'Em or Leave 'Em, Dr. Beverly Kay, and she's got 26 strategies. And I'm not here to advertise her book, but it's fascinating. I've used it for years. And one of the things I was talking to this person about is her love 'em or lose 'em strategy number 10, which is what's more important. Don't lose the person because of the policy, or taking policies over people. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of value into having your employees come in, spend a couple of minutes, and it depends. Are we talking an hour? Are we talking about like 10, 15 minutes, 12 minutes? Are they still productive? Are they missing deadlines? All those things need to come into play. But overall, yes, you must pay them. But really, why is that an issue? Why? Unless they're really taking advantage of it. So policy over people, let your folks interact, enjoy themselves. You may get more out of them than what you're paying them for. That's what I think of when I see that question.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer to that question. And I do think, right, because what's the other option, right? So they check in, right, and they punch in at 7:50. They're supposed to start at 8. They go get their coffee. They're chatting around. They start work at 8 o'clock like they're supposed to. And now you're like, hey, we're not paying you for that 10 minutes. Now you have to get them to change the time card, right? Because you can't change it, because that becomes this whole illegal thing, changing time, wage theft, and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I kind of understand, right? Again, to me, it goes back to the policy. What does your policy really say? And if it doesn't say anything, I think Chuck's right. But if it does say, hey, you can't punch into 8 o'clock, why has this been allowed to go on? right? If it's a major issue, because to me, I'm with Chuck, like within the first 15 minutes, I'm not worried about it. But if it's a half hour, 45 minutes and people are coming in, then that's 45 minutes of overtime every day. That's going to add up.
Yeah.
Right. And so then it becomes a financial thing that I want to be like, hey, I want to address it. I want to think about it. And so I do think there is that thing. What about this, Chuck? Let's say they don't punch in, right? Let's say they don't punch in. They're scheduled to be on the clock at 8 o'clock. They come in at 7:30 and they go to their locker. They put up their jacket. They go to the break room, get coffee. Is there any risk to the organization if they do that?
No. And, I got to tell you, reading this, I realize now they're clocking in early. I thought they were, if they clock in on time, spend a couple minutes going to get the coffee and stuff like that, I guess, but if they're clocking in early, that could create an overtime situation, right?
Yeah.
And then they have to leave early. But the situation you just described, no, I don't think it. They're not doing anything that benefits the employer in that.
What about what about liability, workman's comp concerns? Like they're in the building, they haven't punched in yet, but they trip over something they trip over a metal pipe on the way to the break room.
It happens. It could happen. It's just, but telling people, now you could tell folks, we don't open the doors till 7 a.m. in the office, so don't come in.
Right.
But that's solely up to you. You can, say 7:30 is when we start allowing people to come into the office.
Yeah.
But yeah, if someone does fall and they're on work property, it could be considered workers' comp. Sure.
Yeah, again, I think those are the things you have to think about in terms of when you open your building. Because some people like to get to work early. Or more likely is they don't know how long it's going to take them to get to work because of traffic. And so they always give themselves 15, 20 minutes. And do you want them to sit out in the car in the parking lot or do you want them in your building, right? And so kind of thinking about that thing. And to Chuck's point, think about the human being, right? Think about that human being. I think that's a good way to answer that. All right.
Yeah.
Next question.
All right. Next question.
So this is from Mirna from California. And she asked, hey, I started at a new company and there are a few employees who do not have I-9s or other paperwork. What should I do? How do I handle that?
Well, you should. Yeah, I often say, John, one of the first things I do is I look at the I-9s when I go into a company, because that'll tell me the health. It's like a diagnostic thing of the company, of the HR department. So yeah, what you do is you get those I-9s fixed. You go through an I-9 audit process strategically, fundamentally, and you get I-9s for all of the folks that you're missing I-9s on. Now, I just want to make sure everyone knows you do not run them back through E-Verify. Some people still don't know that, but you don't do that. But you can get new I-9s, have them fill out new I-9s. Do not falsify dates, and do a memo to file saying on this date I started with this company. I noticed there were no I-9s. This is what we did. This is how we fixed it. And you put that in a binder, like a message in the bottle, and then you move on with the rest of your, work.
Yeah. No, I agree. And one thing I was going to say, which you kind of said, is when it says first day of work, it's the first day of work. It's not when you're filling out the new I-9, right? And so again, hey, this is the first day of work. This is when they started working. True. Here's the date we're doing it. And then doing that log in your I-9 audit that says, John Tallheimer didn't have an I-9 on this day. We got them to fill out a complete I-9, right? And so, and again, right, then we get into documentation, that kind of stuff. It's when they're filling out that I-9, even if they've been with the company for 2 years, you still need to do the proper documentation, right? They still need to have the identity and the work authorization, right? You still need both of those documents, or document from A, but you need to identify that they have work authorization and that that's the employee, right? So you have to do it on the date you're doing it. not going, well, they were okay back when they did it the first time. It doesn't matter. You have to do it then. So nice. That was an easy one. That was an easy, quick, easy one. All right.
Easy, quick
So
one.
this
Easy
is from
peasy.
somebody that wanted to remain anonymous from the Facebook group. And it says this: what would you do if you had a recent new hire that is not performing well going around and saying that if terminated, I will file a wrongful termination lawsuit, Chuck, blah, blah, blah. All right, so here's the backstory. They started over a month ago as a supervisor, but is having a hard time learning the system. They were caught on the phone while others were working and is not being a team leader. The manager spoke to them about these issues and giving them extra training, but the employee is going around saying they will file a wrongful termination if fired. Can you write them up for this? So how would you handle that situation, Chuck?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this wrongful termination lawsuit. Well, I'll say I'll file wrongful termination lawsuit. Yeah. I don't even know if that actually exists as a checkbox on any court case form or whatever. There has to be something, right? Is it a violation of the law? Is it a violation of your the Civil Rights Amendment, EEOC, discrimination? That sort of thing.
Right.
So that's the problem. And I hear people say, "Oh, wrongful termination." Well, guess what? If we terminated you because you weren't performing the job, and we have the documentation to show that we gave you chances, we tried to train you, we then let you go for no other reason under the fact that you can't do the job, I guess anyone could file anything, but there is no wrongful termination. Right. So it's just someone blustering.
Yeah, and I think that's good. And would you write them up for going, hey, would you write them up for going to their coworkers and saying, I'm going to file, if they terminate me, I'm going to file a wrongful termination lawsuit?
Their emotional state is a contagion.
Oh, nice.
And they are toxic. So I would look in my handbook to see if there's anything there that that could help me, possibly, document or counsel them or coach them. But then do we get into that thing where people have the right to talk about the terms and conditions of their employment? So, sometimes, John, with these folks, I'll pull them aside and say, guess what? I'm just going to be honest with you. No one likes to be around you. Really? Yeah. You know why? Because you're bringing everyone down. You're talking about this stuff. And, at some point in time, I even had one person be told at a lunch table, you can't have lunch with us anymore.
Oh.
They came to me, they were upset. I said, well, let me tell you why the group said that. Okay. So anyways, writing them up, no. Coaching them, probably.
It's probably worth a conversation. But I going back to what you said, right? I would document their performance, right? I would want that manager to document, and making sure they do that. And if I would go like, okay, I hear you're saying you're going to, I hear the rumor has it that you're going to file wrongful termination lawsuit, blah, blah, blah. Look, this is how people are perceiving you, right? So I would tell them, this is the way people perceive you in the workplace. Just so you know, if we terminate you, we're going to do it for a cause, right? We're going to do it because we have documentation, evidence. We're going to do that. There's going to be no wrongful termination here. I probably wouldn't get into that, but that's in my mind. I'm like, what are you talking about? Wrongful termination. You're not doing the job. I have proof that you're not doing the job. That's why we're firing you. Boom. Right. And again, this is where documentation is key, and making sure your manager there. The last thing I will say on this, and you've heard me say it before, Chuck, if there's a bad employee, there's a bad manager. And I want to know why this manager hired this person. What did they see in them?
Yeah.
What did they think they were doing well? Because obviously they're not doing their job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, last question of the day. And I thought this was interesting. So this was again from the Facebook group. What's your take on the candidate sending thank yous following a screening phone call?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for our new listeners, John's referring to our HR team of one, which is a Facebook group, which some people have said is the best HR face group on Facebook. Did I say that? Yeah, maybe I was redundant with that statement.
Yeah,
So the HR team of one on Facebook.
yeah,
And
what I would
to
say
this,
is it's not great because it's our Facebook group. It's great because of
right.
the members in there and the insights they offer to each other, right? And so to me, I get on there almost every day and I'm reading, I'm like, oh, that's such a great point. Oh, that's fantastic. And so kind of doing that
Yeah,
as well.
it's good stuff. It's
Yeah.
good stuff. 4,000 members all holding up each other and helping each other. So what's your take on this? I don't know. I guess it's okay. You know, thank you. You send me a thank you. I think it's good from a marketing standpoint, maybe for the candidate to send something. As an HR person, you know, then I'm like, okay, then I got to say, oh, great. Yeah. Thanks for your thanks. But I guess it's okay, John. It's
But,
interesting someone put this out
well,
there
but
as
I
a
think so.
question.
Let's switch that take. Do you think it's necessary to send thank yous? Do you think it's beneficial to the candidate to send thank yous to the HR department after a phone screening call?
It doesn't really change what my decision if after a conversation. Maybe it may influence. Maybe if something's close, I say, look at this person, they're really into it, they're really interested. Maybe it's beneficial. I can't say I've made a decision based on someone sending me a thank you or not.
Yeah.
Although I will tell you, now that I think about it, I'm thinking about a few people that I actually brought in, hosted them for lunch,
That's different, right?
gave them a tour.
Yeah.
I think that's worthy of a thank you, and I didn't get one.
Yeah, and that's I think because I think the question was, and the way people were answering it online, for a phone screening or a screening like a sample test screening where you're asking them to do something. I don't think it's necessary in that case, but when they come in and do the interview and a person gives you their time and they give you a tour, you host them at the dining table, then I think, hey, thank you so much for doing that. It was really nice to get to meet you. I'm really excited because I do think it's an opportunity in a very informal way to reinforce that you're interested in the job, right? Chuck, so thank you so much for giving me a tour of the resort. I really appreciate it. There's so many cool things I saw. I'm really interested in helping this, whatever, right? Get into that mission of it. But I don't think for a phone screening call when you're, because you're probably, if you're interviewing, you're doing like, you may be doing 10, 20 different phone screenings in a day. I'm not going to send a thank you note. Sorry.
Exactly. Then it gets to be annoying, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you're like, and then people are doing that. Again, I always say sending that handwritten note, right? Not the email, the handwritten note, like, hey, thank you so much. It was great meeting you. Send it that night. So it gets there. You're right, Chuck. I don't know how much that's going to influence somebody in making their decision, but I do think it's worth the time because you may not be the right person for this job, but when your name comes up again, people are going to think highly of you. Oh, they sent that note, right? I still remember a few of the thank you notes I got from people, and I'm always thinking, oh, do I have a role for them?
Absolutely. That is true. So, well, folks, thank you. You've joined us again for another HR Stories podcast Q&A edition. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our book, the The Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. The second edition is coming out soon. Very popular, very helpful.
What?
Giving you all the answers.
Are you announcing this now? Wait, we haven't talked about the pre-launch. Don't say anything about the second edition yet, Chuck.
Hey, if someone made it to the end of this podcast today,
ladies and gentlemen, a little bonus.
A little bonus.
I'm just teasing them.
Little bonus. Anyways, thank you, John.
Thank you,
Thanks
Chuck.
for the questions. And folks, we'll see you next week. Oh, let the sun shine in. Take it with a grin. Smilers never lose, and frowners never win.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.